The forest was supposed to be a place of escape. For Ethan and his 4 friends, it was meant to be a simple weekend camping trip before everyone went their separate ways after college. They chose a remote location deep in the mountains, a place with no cell service, no nearby roads, and no signs of civilization for miles. It sounded perfect, at least at first. The drive took nearly 4 hours. By the time they arrived, the sun was already beginning to sink behind the trees. Towering pines surrounded the campsite from every direction. The air smelled of damp earth and pine needles. Apart from the occasional chirping bird, the forest was silent. "Feels creepy out here," Josh joked as he unloaded his backpack. "Everything feels creepy to you." Ethan laughed. The others agreed. The campsite was beautiful. A wide clearing sat between the trees, providing plenty of space for tents and a campfire. As darkness settled over the woods, they cooked food, shared stories, and enjoyed the peace that came with being far away from the noise of the city. Then Ethan noticed something. At first, he thought it was a tree. A dark shape stood just beyond the reach of the firelight, far away, motionless. He squinted. The shape looked oddly human, a tall figure standing among the trees. Watching them, Ethan blinked. The figure was gone. He shook his head and assumed he had imagined it. Hours later, everyone crawled into their tents. The forest became silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Sometime around 2 a.m, Ethan woke up. A strange feeling lingered in the back of his mind. The feeling that someone was nearby. He unzipped his tent slightly and peeked outside. The campfire had burned down to glowing embers. Everything looked normal. Then he saw it. The figure, standing between 2 trees, much closer than before. His heart immediately began racing. The figure wasn't moving. It simply stood there, watching. Ethan stared for several seconds. Eventually, he convinced himself it was another camper. Maybe someone had gotten lost. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Whatever the explanation, he wasn't interested in finding out. He zipped the tent shut and tried to sleep. The next morning, he told his friends. Most of them laughed. "Probably a deer," Ryan said. "A deer standing on 2 legs?" Ethan asked. "Maybe a very talented deer." Everyone laughed. The mood remained light, but Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, they explored nearby trails before returning to camp. As the sun disappeared, the uncomfortable feeling returned. The darkness beyond the campfire suddenly felt much deeper than before. Around midnight, Josh froze while roasting a marshmallow. "Do you guys see that?" Everyone turned. There it was. The figure, standing among the trees. Silent, motionless, watching. Nobody spoke. The atmosphere changed instantly. The figure remained visible for nearly 20 seconds before disappearing behind a tree. "What the hell was that?" Ryan whispered. No one had an answer. For the first time, nobody was laughing. The following morning, they searched the area. If another camper was nearby, there should have been evidence. Footprints, trash, a tent, anything. Instead, they found nothing. The forest seemed untouched. The only unusual discovery came shortly before noon. Footprints, human footprints, surrounding their campsite. The tracks formed a rough circle, as though someone had spent hours walking around the tents during the night. The group exchanged nervous looks. Nobody spoke, because everyone was thinking the same thing. Someone had been there, very close. That night, nobody wanted to sit outside after dark. They kept the fire burning brighter than usual. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Eventually, they began relaxing. Maybe the stranger had moved on. Maybe everything had been a misunderstanding. Then Ethan heard a twig snap. He looked toward the forest. The figure had returned, closer than ever, standing just beyond the trees. The firelight illuminated enough of its body to reveal dark clothing. A hood covered its head. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. It simply watched for nearly a full minute. Then it slowly stepped backward into the darkness and vanished. Nobody slept that night. The next morning, they decided to install cameras around camp. If someone was stalking them, they wanted proof. The cameras were positioned strategically around the clearing. One pointed toward the northern tree line. Another covered the southern approach. A third monitored the campsite itself. Throughout the day, nothing unusual happened, but shortly after sunset, the feeling returned. The sensation that unseen eyes were staring from the darkness. Hours passed. Then the figure appeared again, this time even closer, close enough for everyone to see clearly. The hooded stranger stood perfectly still among the trees, watching, waiting. The group immediately grabbed flashlights. Ryan shouted, "Who are you?" No response. Josh took several steps forward. The figure disappeared. Not by running, not by turning. 1 second, it was visible. The next, it was gone, as though it had melted into the darkness itself. The next morning, they reviewed the camera footage. For hours, they saw nothing unusual. Then one recording caught their attention. At 2:17 a.m., a dark silhouette appeared at the edge of the frame. The figure stood motionless for nearly 40 minutes, watching the campsite, watching them sleep. Nobody spoke while viewing the footage, because the camera revealed something terrifying. The figure wasn't standing near the tree line. It was standing only a few feet from Ethan's tent, far closer than anyone realized. Fear quickly turned into panic. The trip was supposed to last another 2 days. Instead, they decided to leave immediately. As they packed their equipment, Ethan noticed something strange. A small object rested near the remains of the campfire. It looked like a photograph. He picked it up. His stomach dropped. The photograph showed their campsite, taken during the first night. While they sat around the fire, someone had been watching them from the woods, taking pictures. For days. Nobody knew who. Nobody knew why. They loaded their gear and drove away as fast as possible. The forest disappeared behind them, yet none of them felt relieved, because the questions remained unanswered. Weeks later, Ethan received a message from Josh. Attached was a screenshot from the camera footage. Josh had been reviewing the recordings again, looking for details they might have missed, and he found one. The figure wasn't alone. Hidden among the trees behind it were several other silhouettes, watching, standing perfectly still, barely visible in the darkness. Nobody knew how many there were. Nobody ever learned who they were. And despite multiple reports to local authorities, no explanation was ever found. To this day, whenever Ethan thinks about that trip, one detail continues to haunt him: the photograph. Because after enhancing the image, they discovered something terrifying. The person who took the picture wasn't standing in the forest. The photograph had been taken from inside their campsite, only a few feet away, while everyone was sitting around the fire, completely unaware that someone was already among them, and watching from the dark. Some people are afraid of being alone. Others are afraid of discovering they were never alone to begin with. For 26-year-old Sarah Malik, the nightmare began with a single glance out her apartment window. She lived on the 4th floor of an aging apartment complex on the edge of the city. The building wasn't luxurious, but it was affordable, quiet, and close to her workplace. For nearly 2 years, nothing unusual had ever happened there. Then one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday. Sarah had just finished work and settled onto her couch with a cup of tea. Rain tapped softly against the windows as she watched television. Around 11:30 p.m., she got up to close the blinds. Before pulling them shut, she looked outside and froze. A man was standing in the parking lot, directly below her apartment, motionless, looking up at her. At first, she assumed he was waiting for someone, but something felt wrong. The man wasn't moving, wasn't checking a phone, wasn't smoking, wasn't pacing. He was simply standing there, staring. Sarah watched for nearly a minute. The stranger never looked away. A strange chill crawled up her spine. She quickly closed the blinds and convinced herself she was overreacting. The next morning, the man was gone. Life continued normally until the following night. At exactly 11:30 p.m., Sarah glanced outside again. The same man stood in the same location, looking directly at her apartment, motionless, watching. A knot formed in her stomach. She immediately stepped away from the window. The following evening, she checked again. The man was there. Same place, same posture, same unsettling stare. Night after night, the pattern continued. Always 11:30. Always the same spot. Always watching. Within a week, Sarah's nerves were shattered. She began sleeping poorly. Every creak in the apartment made her jump. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Eventually, she decided to report the situation to building management. The manager listened carefully, then frowned. "You said he only appears at night." Sarah nodded. "And he's always standing in the same place?" "Every time." The manager promised to investigate. The following evening, he reviewed the building's security cameras. The next day, he called Sarah. His voice sounded confused. "We checked the footage, and there was nobody there." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean, nobody?" "The cameras show an empty parking lot." Sarah's hands began trembling. "I saw him. I'm not saying you didn't. But the cameras didn't record anyone." That explanation should have reassured her. Instead, it terrified her, because she knew exactly what she'd seen. The following night, she prepared herself. At 11:25, she stood by the window, waiting. 5 minutes later, the man appeared, as if he had materialized from the darkness itself, standing beneath a flickering streetlight, watching. Sarah immediately grabbed her phone. She zoomed in and snapped several photographs. When she checked them moments later, her blood ran cold. The parking lot was empty. The man wasn't visible in any picture. Yet when she looked through the window, he was still standing there, watching. Sarah barely slept. Over the next several days, her fear turned into obsession. She began researching the building's history. What she discovered made everything worse. Years earlier, multiple tenants had filed complaints about a mysterious man standing outside the building at night. Descriptions varied slightly, but the details were always similar. A motionless figure, watching, never approaching, never leaving. Several tenants had reportedly moved out shortly afterward. Others refused to discuss the incidents altogether. One report, dated nearly 12 years earlier, contained a sentence Sarah would never forget. "He stands outside every night. I don't think he's watching the building. I think he's watching me." Sarah felt sick. That night, she called her friend Emma and explained everything. Emma immediately came over. "You've been stressing yourself out," Emma said. "We'll watch together." At 11:30, they stood by the window. Silence filled the apartment. Then Emma gasped. "Oh my God." Sarah slowly looked up. The man was there, watching. For the first time, someone else had seen him. Proof. Validation. Relief flooded through Sarah, until Emma whispered something terrifying. "Why is he smiling?" Sarah's heart stopped. The figure's expression had changed. A wide, unnatural smile stretched across his face. Neither woman had noticed it before. The smile never moved, never blinked, never changed. It simply remained frozen beneath the streetlight, watching, waiting. Neither of them slept that night. The next evening, Sarah contacted police. 2 officers arrived shortly before midnight. At exactly 11:30, the man appeared again. Sarah pointed frantically through the window. There! That's him. The officers looked outside, confused. One officer shook his head. We don't see anyone. Sarah stared in disbelief. The figure was clearly visible, standing beneath the streetlight, watching. Yet somehow, the officers saw nothing. One of them searched the parking lot anyway. The man vanished before he arrived. No trace remained. The officers eventually left. Sarah was alone again, and more frightened than ever. Days passed. The sightings continued. Then something changed. One night, the parking lot was empty. The man hadn't appeared. For the first time in weeks, relief washed over her. Maybe it was finally over. Maybe whatever nightmare had been haunting her was gone. Then she heard footsteps outside her apartment. Slow, measured, approaching. Sarah froze. The hallway beyond her door was silent except for those footsteps. Step, step, step. Then they stopped. Directly outside apartment 407, her apartment. Sarah couldn't breathe. Someone was standing on the other side of the door, waiting, watching. Minutes passed. Neither side moved. Then came a soft knock. 3 taps. Nothing more. Sarah remained frozen. The knocking returned. 3 slow taps. Again and again. For nearly an hour. Then silence. Eventually she looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No one was there. The next morning, she checked the security cameras. Her blood turned to ice. The footage showed a dark figure standing outside apartment 407 from 11:34 p.m. until 3:12 a.m. Motionless. Watching her door, the image quality was poor, but the silhouette looked identical to the man from the parking lot. That was enough. Sarah packed her belongings and moved out within 2 days. She never returned. Months later, curiosity got the better of her. She contacted a former neighbor. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Before hanging up, the neighbor said something Sarah still thinks about today. After you left, the man stopped showing up outside. Relief washed over Sarah. Then the neighbor continued. But now he stands outside another apartment. Sarah felt her stomach sink. What apartment? A long silence followed. Then the answer came. Apartment 512. The apartment directly above hers. Another tenant. Another target. Another person waking each night to find someone watching from the dark. And according to building records, the sightings are still happening, even now. At exactly 11:30 p.m., someone stands beneath the streetlight, looking up, waiting for the lights in the window to turn on. There are moments in life that feel unreal, moments where your mind refuses to accept what's happening. For 17-year-old Daniel Carter, that moment began at 1:14 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The day had been completely normal. Students filled the hallways of Westbrook High School. Teachers lectured from whiteboards. Conversations echoed through classrooms. Nobody knew that within minutes, the school would enter the most terrifying lockdown in its history. Daniel sat in history class near the back of the room. The lesson was boring. Most students were half asleep. Then the intercom crackled. The principal's voice came through the speakers. It sounded tense, far more serious than usual. Attention staff and students. This is an emergency lockdown. I repeat, this is an emergency lockdown. Follow lockdown procedures immediately." The classroom instantly fell silent. Nobody moved. For a moment, everyone thought it was a drill. Then the teacher hurried to the door and locked it. The blinds were pulled shut. Lights were turned off. Students were instructed to hide beneath desks and along the far wall. Panic spread quickly. Whispers filled the darkness. What happened? Is someone inside the school? Is this real? No one knew. Outside, the hallway became eerily quiet. The silence felt wrong, heavy, unnatural. Minutes crawled by. Daniel checked his phone. Social media was already exploding with rumors. Some students claimed a dangerous intruder had entered the building. Others reported hearing screams from the lower floors. Nobody knew what was true. Then Daniel noticed something. The classroom door had a narrow window built into it, a small rectangle of glass facing the hallway. Most students avoided looking toward it. Daniel couldn't. Something about the darkness outside felt unsettling. He kept staring, and then he saw it. A face. Watching through the window, his heart nearly stopped. The face appeared only for a second, pale, expressionless. Then it vanished. Daniel immediately whispered to the student beside him, "I just saw someone." "What?" At the door. The student slowly looked. Nothing was there. The hallway remained empty. Daniel convinced himself it had been his imagination. The stress, the fear, the uncertainty. But 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time, 3 students saw it. A face, watching, then disappearing. The teacher quietly approached the window. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Yet multiple students had seen it. A strange tension filled the room. Fear transformed into something deeper, something harder to explain. By 2 p.m., police had surrounded the school. Students received text messages from worried parents. Nobody was allowed to leave. Nobody was told what was happening. Then came another sighting. This time, not a face. A silhouette, a dark figure, standing motionless at the far end of the hallway, watching the classroom. Several students recorded videos using their phones. The figure remained visible for nearly 20 seconds, then disappeared behind a corner. When officers searched that section of the building minutes later, nobody was found. The lockdown continued, hour after hour. The atmosphere became unbearable. Every sound felt amplified. Every creak made students jump. Then strange things started happening. Reports emerged from other classrooms. Students throughout the school claimed they had seen the same figure, always watching, always silent, always disappearing before anyone could reach it. Security personnel reviewed surveillance cameras. The footage revealed something disturbing. At various times throughout the lockdown, a dark figure appeared in different hallways, standing still, watching, then vanishing moments before officers arrived. The sightings were impossible. Some occurred simultaneously in different parts of the school, as if multiple figures were present, or as if the same figure somehow moved through the building faster than physically possible. Nobody could explain it. Around 4:30 p.m., officers began conducting room-by-room searches. The original threat remained unidentified. Students were exhausted, scared, confused. Then the school's head of security made a discovery. One surveillance camera had captured the figure more clearly than any other. The footage showed a tall person standing at the end of a basement corridor, motionless, facing the camera, watching. The timestamp indicated the recording had been made only minutes earlier. Officers immediately moved toward the basement. Daniel's classroom received updates through messages from other students. Rumors spread rapidly. The police found him. They're cornering him. He's trapped downstairs. Everyone waited. Nothing happened. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, reports emerged from officers. The basement was empty. No intruder. No suspect. Nothing. The corridor shown in the footage contained no exits, no hiding places, no explanation. Yet the figure had clearly been recorded there. The lockdown stretched into evening. Darkness settled outside. Rain hammered against classroom windows. Students grew increasingly nervous. Then came the moment Daniel would never forget. At approximately 6:12 p.m., the classroom door window darkened, as if someone had stepped directly in front of it. Every student noticed. The room fell silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Slowly, very slowly, a face appeared, watching them, closer than ever before. Its eyes seemed completely black. Its expression remained empty, emotionless. Several students screamed. Others began crying. The teacher immediately called for assistance. The face remained visible for several seconds, then moved away. When officers arrived less than 30 seconds later, the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no sounds, nothing. The figure had vanished once again. Shortly afterward, authorities ended the lockdown. Students were evacuated under police supervision. Parents rushed to reunite with their children. News crews gathered outside. Yet officials refused to provide answers. The identity of the supposed intruder remained unknown. No arrests were made. No suspects were found. The official report described the incident as a response to a potential threat that could not be verified. For most people, the story ended there. For Daniel, it didn't. A week later, someone leaked portions of the school's surveillance footage online. The videos spread rapidly. Thousands of people watched them. Most were grainy and unclear, but one clip stood out. The basement recording. The same footage officers had investigated. Viewers noticed something investigators initially missed. The figure wasn't standing at the end of the hallway. It was standing much closer to the camera than anyone realized, partially hidden within a shadow beside the corridor wall. Watching. When the footage was enhanced, the image became even more disturbing. The figure appeared to be staring directly into the camera lens, as if it knew it was being recorded, as if it wanted to be seen. The video quickly disappeared from the internet, but copies continued circulating among students. Years later, former students still discuss the lockdown. Many insist they saw the figure with their own eyes. Others refuse to talk about the event at all. The school administration has never released additional footage, and several surveillance files reportedly vanished from the archive shortly after the incident. To this day, nobody knows who or what was watching the students that afternoon, but one detail continues to haunt Daniel. Months after graduation, he re-watched one of the recordings, frame by frame, looking for answers. Instead, he discovered something terrifying. During one brief moment, the reflection in a classroom window revealed another figure standing behind the camera operator, watching, meaning the person filming was never alone, and perhaps neither were any of the students. Because while everyone focused on the figure in the hallway, something else may have been watching from the dark the entire time. Outro. 3 stories. 3 watchers hidden in the darkness. And 3 mysteries that remain unsolved. The question is, if you notice someone silently watching you from the shadows tonight, would you look closer? Or would you pretend you never saw them at all? Let me know in the comments which story disturbed you the most. And don't forget to subscribe for more true horror stories. Sleep well and keep an eye on the darkness.